I'm Dr. Orion Taraban, and this is PsycHacks, Better Living Through Psychology. And the topic of today's short talk is Love the Label. So this episode is going to be especially for the younger guys out there. I assume that the older, successful men have already figured this out. Look, it's actually very important to label yourself and to love your label, both in the professional and in the sexual marketplace. And when I suggest this to the younger guys, I often encounter much of the same resistance I manifested when I myself was in my 20s. I don't want to be put in a box. I don't want to just be one thing to all people. How restrictive, how stifling, how dull. I had a lot of interests and talents. I considered myself to be a multifaceted person, and I rankled at the idea of being reduced to a single, simplistic conception in the minds of others. I get it. However, I'm here to tell you that in terms of all the outcomes that really matter, it's not a good strategy to present yourself as a generalist or even as too complex of an individual. When it comes to making money and getting women, you're going to want to specialize. You will need to find, or more likely build, your niche, and you need to embrace this identity. I'll explain using some anecdotes from my own life. From a professional standpoint, this issue has occurred twice for me, both when I started my private tutoring company and my private practice. I tried to be all things to all people. Since I was just starting out, I didn't yet have a big book of business, and I was afraid of even letting a single potential customer fall through my catchment. As a result, as a tutor, I presented myself as being able to teach Latin and physics and test prep and writing and calculus. As a therapist, as capable of addressing depression and anxiety and trauma and personality disorders and narcissistic abuse, etc. And neither one of these strategies led to much success. And it's actually easy to see why. When you present yourself as a jack of all trades, you kind of dilute the perceived value of any one of your services. If people are going to part with their hard-earned money, they want to feel reasonably confident that you're the man for the job. After all, each individual customer typically comes to you for one problem only, and they're far more likely to choose someone who specializes in that one problem than someone who simply lists it as one among their many, many services. It was only when I began to specialize exclusively in GRE test prep on the one hand, and in men's mental health on the other, that things really began to pick up. And given the fact that these both really were specialties of mine, and that I authentically enjoyed providing these services, this wasn't that difficult, aside from the natural hesitation I initially felt over putting all of my proverbial eggs in a single basket. However, the consequences of doing so were as positive as they were immediate. Once you become known as the person for that thing, people will start to beat a path to your door. On some level, you want to be Joe the plumber. Now, Joe actually might be good at more than plumbing. He might wish that people would appreciate him for his own skills and interests and attributes, but being known as Joe the plumber is exceptional for his business prospects. In general, it's better to be the first person who comes to mind among a smaller subset of people than the second or the 10th person who comes to mind among a larger. Why? Because when their toilets are clogged, Joe is going to be the first person they think of. Like, even the second place finisher is only going to get a shot if Joe is busy. Do you see? And this means that Joe is very quickly going to have a wait list, which demand will encourage him to raise the price of his services until he reaches some kind of mini-max solution. Joe allowed other people to put him in a box, and he benefited enormously from that willingness. It's also important not to present yourself as too complex of an individual. Look, marketplaces are insanely competitive, much more so than most people imagine. Consequently, it's going to be very difficult to be very good at more than one thing. But this sometimes does happen. So let's assume within his market, Joe actually is the number one plumber and, let's say, the number one wedding planner. Unfortunately, presenting himself in this way will likely be counterproductive. Because his two services are so disparate, it diminishes credibility in both of his areas of expertise, which will lead to reduced confidence and outreach on the part of his customers. It would be better, in this case, for Joe to use a pseudonym for his wedding planning business and to keep his two professional identities separate. Once you become very successful, it is possible to branch into other domains, provided any new identities are kind of related to your already established business. This is basically the strategy of horizontal or vertical integration, and the benefits can often be synergistic. But if you're just starting out, I wouldn't rush into this. Better to become well established in one area first. Ready to implement what you've learned here in your own life? Then you need the Captain's Quarters, my private community for individuals ready to put psych hacks to work. Participate in my live group consultation calls, where I apply the principles you've followed for years to your own unique circumstances in real time. Your problems, my solutions. Attend AMAs with notable guests. Access an unlisted archive of community content. Receive discounts on individual consultations, and much, much more. So if you're ready to ascend to your captaincy, or you just want to hear all the stuff I can't say on YouTube, then the Captain's Quarters is for you. Hope to see you on board. And of course, if it works in business, it works with women. As I've mentioned repeatedly, most men are wallpaper. They don't want to present themselves as an identifiable, reducible type for the same reason I initially didn't want to put myself in a box in the professional marketplace. Namely, they receive so little female attention anyway, they're worried that becoming a type will reduce their slim pickings even further. This is an example of scarcity mentality, plain and simple. As a consequence, they try not to stand out in order not to be disqualified by any potentially interested woman. As a result, however, they tend not to attract the notice of anyone. In general, it is far, far better to be more attractive to fewer women than to be less attractive to more. Think about it. If only 0.1% of women found you to be very attractive, that's still 4 million women worldwide. I don't care how much of a stud you are, that is far more women than you're ever going to be able to handle. And trust me, those 0.1% of women are going to be significantly more enjoyable to handle. Why? Because when a woman is very attracted to you, she makes things easy. There are fewer tests and more affection, fewer problems and more submission. They will put themselves in your orbit more obviously and frequently, and you'll have much more satisfying relationships with them. The key is to make it easier for this 0.1% of women to find you. And you do that by leaning into the masculine archetype you most closely approximate. Now, as soon as you do this, you will immediately signal that you are not for the majority of women. That's all right. They weren't your customers anyway. And you cannot listen to the complaints or feedback of those who were never going to buy your product or use your service anyway. For example, when I launched my virtual agent, Orion AI, a few months ago, I received scores of negative messages from people. Orion, how could you? This is terrible. You're contributing to the digital singularity. You're furthering AI psychosis. Frankly, I'm disappointed in you. But the fact of the matter is that none of those opinions matter. It doesn't matter how good my product was, or how useful it could be, or how much value it could provide. These people were anti-AI, and they were never going to be customers for this product anyway. Consequently, their thoughts on the matter are completely irrelevant. They exhibited contempt prior to investigation, and their opinions were formed even before engaging with the product. You can't allow people who will never step foot in your shop to dictate how you do business. On the other hand, the feedback from your actual users can be of immense value. And for the record, the feedback from my actual users has not only been positive, but extremely so. By the same token, if you allow the opinions of women who aren't interested in you to dictate how you present yourself to the world, you're not going to have much success in the game of mating and dating. Even if you make the mistake of trying to accommodate them, they're unlikely to suddenly become an enthusiastic customer. It's a much, much better idea to present yourself clearly to the marketplace and to optimize for those who are willing to put their money where their mouth is. Only a fraction of people in both the professional and the sexual marketplace are ever going to want to do business with you. And that's okay. If you play your cards right, you'll soon have more interest than you know what to do with. And you'll do that by identifying those who are already predisposed to be your customers and to increasingly specialize in the core elements that constitute their interest. What do you think? Does this fit with your own experience? Let me know in the comments below. And please, send this episode to someone who you think might benefit from its message. I know you know a guy who needs to hear this because it's word of mouth referrals like that really help to make the channel grow, guys. Now, my list of services is getting long, so I have to consolidate here. I have a lot of value elsewhere if you like what I present here on YouTube. First, I have a free weekly newsletter. I have the opportunity to book paid one-on-one consultations with me. And I have my books, my bestseller on relationships, The Value of Others, and my novel about the final days of Vincent van Gogh, Starry Night. I have my agent, as mentioned, Orion AI, providing round-the-clock counsel whenever you need it. Finally, I have my private community, the Captain's Quarters, where I respond to your issues in real time in live group consultations. There's so much value there. If you're at all disposed, check them out using the links below. There's a lot there that I can't show on YouTube. As always, I appreciate your support and thank you for listening.